Hello, everyone. Spooky, huh? Tonight, we're going to dive headfirst into the movie 30 Days of Night. But thank you for tuning in to Real Talk on 92.5 WLSD The Vault. It's going to be a great show. I'm going to be having a lot of fun with this episode and kind of going back and revisiting a movie from 2007. Now, that being said, go to all of our social media pages. That's the Facebook, Spotify, YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram, The Other People's Show. And go back and listen to many of the episodes that we have posted. But 30 Days of Night is a movie that, like I said, it's been a little while since I've watched it. I really did enjoy it when I first went to the theater and saw it. Interesting side note was that when I went to the movie theater to watch 30 Days of Night, I lived in the Washington, D.C. area. And I wanted to try something a little bit different, I don't want to say a little bit different, but I wanted to see if anyone, I did a social experiment. I went into the movie theater, which I think it was the AMC, but like Potomac AMC Theater. I think there were maybe, if I do recall, maybe 18 screens, 18 cinemas. But anyway, I went in with the intention to see 30 Days of Night. Then afterwards, I walked across the lobby, went to another movie entitled In Her Shoes, which is a Cameron Diaz movie. But I didn't pay for that movie. I just walked in. Now, you could say, you thieved your way in, but I didn't do that at all. The only thing that I did was I walked in. I walked in to the movie theater after watching 30 Days of Night. And after, not paying. So I did pay for 30 Days of Night, but I didn't pay for In Her Shoes. And no one noticed. No one that worked there batted an eye. No one said anything. And it was just a little bit of an experiment to see if anyone cared, to see if anyone noticed. And as suspected, no one did care. No one did notice. And I did that a couple of times at a couple different theaters. No one ever cared. No one ever noticed. No one ever said anything. Now, I don't make that a habit of anything that I do currently, but this was probably back in, mid-2000s, 2006, 2007, and whatnot. But that's how I first went to watch 30 Days of Night. So, if you don't know what 30 Days of Night is, it's after an Alaskan town is plunged into darkness for a month. It is attacked by a bloodthirsty gang of vampires. So that's right, this is a vampire movie. And this is a film that it does have some good visual, practical effects. The acting is good. But we're going to dive in a little bit deeper underneath the surface. So the director is director David Slade, and he's directed a couple different things, most notably a lot of television. But as far as cinema goes, the movie Hard Candy, 30 Days of Night, and Twilight Eclipse. So those are some, Hard Candy. Now, my friend Talitha and I went to see Hard Candy at one of the DC film festivals. And that was a movie with Patrick Wilson and Ellen Page. And that was a movie where it was pretty much a two-person film. And there were some walkouts during that film just due to the nature of the film itself. That one's called Hard Candy. I won't get into that, but you can look that up on IMDb if you want to. It's a great app to get if you love movies, if you're into film and cinema and knowledge about film. I would recommend IMDb on just the app. Now, we've got 30 Days of Night, which is this is a vampire flick, and Twilight is a vampire movie, not quite the same as this movie. The cast has Josh Hartnett, Melissa George, Danny Huston, and Ben Foster, and that rounds out. There's quite a large cast in this, vampire-wise and townsfolk. And a lot of the townsfolk were regional actors and actresses that lived up in in New Zealand. Out of all places is where they actually filmed 30 Days of Night. So, 30 Days of Night is a movie that does take place within the time span of 1 month when it's dark in Alaska for the entire month. So, there's a couple of different movies that also borrow this. One that comes to mind right off is the Al Pacino, Hilary Swank, Robin Williams movie called Insomnia, directed by Christopher Nolan, which is actually a really great movie. That is just the opposite, however, whereas there's 30 Days of Light in that movie. And it takes place in an Alaskan town as well. This one's 30 Days of Night at night. However, they did not shoot entirely at night. Most of the night shots were shot during the day using day for night process. So if you've seen the movie or if you haven't, obviously it's called 30 Days of Night. So that means the majority of the movie, except the beginning and the end, which bookend the film, is going to be night all the way through. That being said, most of these night shots were actually not shot at night, and they were shot during the day, which you would not be able to tell at all. You would not be able to tell one bit that these shots weren't shot during the day. That's part of the Hollywood magic, so to speak. So if speaking of speaking, the vampires speak a completely original language in this movie. It was created for the film with the help of a linguistics professor at the New Zealand University. That's right, folks. The vampires do speak this language amongst themselves. They also speak it to a couple of characters throughout the movie. And if you were trying to place that dialect, that language that they have, it's not a language that you can study and find anywhere else, because it was made entirely for this film. So there was a original vampire language just created for the movie 30 Days of Night, which I thought kind of cool. In reality, Barlow, that's the town that's supposed to be portrayed in the film, doesn't see the sun for 67 days, not 30 days. Now, how do you think that would be? You would have 67 days of night, completely night. Now, I don't know. I really would like to live a span. I would like to test that out, try that out, see how many days that I could go where it's completely night, and vice versa. See how many nights that I could go that are completely day. 24-hour day, 24-hour night. I would like to try these things on for size and video chronicle and go live with how it affects you and just the feel of it. I mean, it would be such an odd feeling that would be perpetually night all the time. 67 days of night. That's over 2.5 months. Or not 2.5 months, but that's over 2 months of completely night. Now, in this movie, Josh Hartnett did all of his own stunts, and Melissa George did most of her own driving. Now, this is kind of a I don't want to categorize this movie as just a horror movie, because it's got some action sequences throughout of the vampire and gory kind. This is a gory film, but Josh Hartnett does a very suitable job as the character Sheriff Eben Olsen, and he does a lot of stunts throughout the movie. He's running, he's jumping, he's doing a lot of fight scenes, driving, things that a lot of stunt people are often used for, but he did most of those. And Melissa George, her character, Stella Olsen, she's also kind of like on the fire and rescue, and her and Eben are kind of separated at this time. Not sure if they're going to be getting back together or not. So yeah, if you've seen this movie, you'll see it's a very demanding role, and I think everyone within the cast did a good job in that regard. Now, all the vampires do have names, and I'm not sure exactly how many vampires. I almost did pause the movie last night just to count how many vampires that I did see on screen. But there are at least, I would say, at least 15, maybe at least 15 minimal, 20 most. But they all have names. But you really don't know any of their names because they're not mentioned until the ending credits. So these vampires, and there's three, I guess four, you could say four vampires that they really do, well, three that they really do focus on the most. And those are the most, I would say, scariest and creepiest of the bunch. Although these aren't the vampires that glitter and that you would possibly want to meet or romance. You would not want to romance any of these vampires or vampiresses. S's? I don't know. But the snow, there's a lot of snow in this film. It takes place in Alaska. But the snow used in the film was not actually snow. Most of it was salt, and some of the snow was edited in to make it look real. Now, that's another aspect of the film that if IMDb did not have these facts about the movie, you would never know. You would never know that that the snow within the film is not snow. You just wouldn't know that it's not snow. So this movie had a budget of $32 million. And you can see it's well worth it. It's when you see movies like this that are, on a modest budget of $30 million, and then you see other movies and you're like, where did that money go? Do practical effects and touch up with the CGI instead of going the other way around. But this was a $30 million movie based on a comic. I didn't say that earlier. And the comic was trying to be made into a movie for quite some time. But this movie made $39.9 million in the United States, and worldwide, $75.5 million. So it wasn't a grand slam of a movie theatrically and financially. Studios usually only recoup half of the final gross. So, they're making about a $10 million profit theatrically. But then they make their big money on, DVD sales, networks buying the rights to show the film, now streaming services, digital deals, all that is making money as well. Rotten Tomatoes had a score of 51% and 56% audience score, with an IMDb Internet Movie Database rating of 6.6. So let's get into a little bit of the story, the plot of the movie. Like I said, 30 Days of Night, there's not a lot of things that you need to set up with this film. The townsfolk, they're preparing for this 30 Days of Night. A lot of people are flying out of town, so there's only a small select group just left in the town. 20 maybe, they say at the very beginning of the movie, because they changed the number of people. It's one of those old signs, population, 802, and then during this 30 days of night, the population goes down to 150. It's something low like that. So that goes on. Eben and his wife, Eben, played by Josh Hartnett, and his wife, Stella, played by Melissa George, they're kind of at odds. They're not getting along, and they might separate in divorce. And I think they are separated when we come in to the film. Now, there's this lone character, the stranger, played by Ben Foster. At the beginning of the film, as I got tongue-tied there. At the beginning of the film, as all this is going on, some strange things begin to happen. Some dogs are killed, large packs of dogs. People go missing. Just some random and seemingly isolated events begin to happen. But then this stranger shows up in the coffee shop, wanting something to eat, wanting something to drink. And it comes to find out that this stranger is leading these vampires to this town in hopes that they will change him into a vampire. Now, he might already be, I think he's already actually bitten, to be honest with you. But I don't think he has fully changed yet. And this character is played by Ben Foster. Now, a lot of people might not know Ben Foster's name, but if you've seen the movie Get Over It, with it has Kirsten Dunst and what's his name, Cisco, the thong song rapper, Cisco. He's in it. Martin Short is in it. And that's a teen comedy from maybe 2002, 2003, that time. He's also a villain in 3:10 to Yuma, the Russell Crowe, Christian Bale Western from around this time. And he's popped up, a couple, Pandorum, a Dennis Quaid film. He's in that. So Ben Foster pops up, from time to time in these, quote, Hollywood movies. And he always does a fantastic job. He's kind of like an under the radar actor, but if you look at him up and you see his face, you'll be like, I've seen him in something. So he does a really good job in the first half of the movie. He's probably just in the first act, maybe the first 20 minutes, but he does a really creepy and good job of kind of setting up the tone of the movie, because he's eating and feeding all of the dogs and things of this nature, whereas the vampires are coming in and they're feeding or wanting to feed off of the town. So the lights, the power, begins to go off, and the vampires are there. They start killing everyone that they come in contact with. A select group, Eben, Stella, Eben's brother, a few of the town folk get together, hiding out and trying to wait out the 30 days. So basically, that's, the gist of the movie. The plot, like I said, I think it's a good plot. I think it's a good story. I think the tone is a little uneven in places, because it's such a build-up with the first 20 minutes of the film. And the actual vampires probably show up. I'm not exactly sure. I should have time marked it last night. But I would say probably 21, 22 minutes, the typical, 3-act structure. And there's chaos and pandemonium for quite some time. And then it kind of levels off, and it's kind of a slow period, a quiet period, where they have to keep quiet, where they're trying to debate their next move as they get cabin fever because they're in this confined space for these 30 days. And they're growing tired and hungry and restless. And this isn't just like all young teens. This is a diverse group. You've got men, women, teenage kid. You've got elderly. There's 2 elderly there. You've got Josh Hartnett and Melissa George. They're probably early to mid 30s at this point. So there are diverse ages within this group. So their level of being able to handle this kind of situation varies. So, they're in dire need. They're in a dire situation. The characters, none of the characters, to be honest, would be... Now, Ben Foster as the Stranger and Danny Houston as Marlowe, the lead head vampire, I think those were cast 100% perfectly. Josh Hartnett does a fantastic job, as does Melissa George. But as good of a job as they do, they could be recast and the movie still go off without a hitch. Probably the other 2 I mentioned firstly as well, but those 2, when you get that sense of fear, when you put the fear into the audience right away, but you don't expose everything at once. The fear being the stranger showing up and looking like he does and asking for raw meat. After these events, the dogs being killed, odd things beginning to happen. And so, Ben Foster cast perfectly. Danny Houston as well, just his mannerisms. He doesn't have a lot of lines, but Danny Houston's another guy that you've seen in movies throughout. 21 Grams. You probably haven't seen it. I would suggest that. That's a Sean Penn, Naomi Watts, and Benicio del Toro movie. He plays the father who meets his demise in that film. And I've seen him in a couple of other things too. He usually plays like a hard-nosed villain or a business villain or something like that. But the cast, they do a great job. But like I said, the 2 leads could be interchangeable if you wanted them to be. Like if you wanted someone from that age group at the time, you could have probably found that. You could have also made them older if you wanted to as well. Either way, I think it would have worked. Favorite scene, least favorite scene. One of my favorite scenes would probably be the when Eben approaches the stranger in the diner. At first is the stranger is in the diner and is asking for some rum. The waitress says, we don't serve rum here. He says, how about bringing me some raw meat? And she says, the kitchen's closed at whatever. And then he's like, you don't bring me what I want to eat. You don't bring me what I want to drink. And then he grabs her wrist. And then that's where Eben happens to walk in. You hear his voice, hey, let the lady go. Why don't me and you have a talk outside? And then, it goes from there. So that opening scene where you first see the stranger and meet him is a really good scene. As is a lot of or all of the effects in the vampire. They pour it on. I mean, this is a gory vampire movie. It doesn't hold back. This is an R-rated film with good reason, and it's mainly due to the blood and the gore and the kills and the screeching that the vampires make. It's terrifying within itself, because if you didn't know that it was a vampire and you just heard this screeching kind of evil sound out in our world, the real world, you would be terrified too. Don't think you wouldn't be. I know you would be, because I would be. And I'm not terrified of anything except spiders and antique bowls and plates and silverware. And it's hard for me to eat out of those things. I have phobias in that regard. That's another show. Least favorite scene. I don't really know if I have a least favorite scene. I think the movie's a little too long. I think some of the 30 days within when they're hiding out, and I know it's tension building and claustrophobic, making the audience feel what these characters are feeling, because there's a handful, 6 or 7, maybe 8 of them, but they're in these enclosed space, and that they don't even deal with or even mention, when you have to use the bathroom. When they discuss the eating and the sleeping and surviving, staying up in shifts of 2, things like this. But it really does paint a great, a great sense of dread. There's dread at every turn. But I do think a few of those moments could be cut down. You trim a minute here, you trim 30 seconds there, but about 10 minutes in total. I think the movie is, I might be wrong, but I think it's an hour and 43, maybe an hour and 50 minutes. But you trim it down to about an hour and 36, 37 minutes, and it's more lean and more pleasing, I think, to the audience. That's my only real criticism. The score and the music, we've been playing a little bit of it throughout the show. I mean, it's a good score. And you can tell just by listening to a little bit of the score how it's like this thrill ride. And it's kind of like this, pandemonium at some points. But it's also dread coming at you from all angles. Listen to that. So yeah, I mean, it goes with the movie perfectly. I think Brian Retzwell did a great job scoring the film, and it's a good one. It paints you into the film, like it puts you right there, just by listening to a little bit of that. I think if you don't know about the film at all, or just listening to this and know nothing of the film, I think listening to that would give you the sense of, this is the ride that I'm about to, be on. I'm about to take this journey, and here's a little piece, a little glimmer of what it's about. Originality, I don't know if this is the only vampire movie that really utilizes the thought of, Alaska, 30 days of night, a month of night. I'm not really sure, to be honest with you. It's a good plot device. So I'm going to say, in my opinion, it is fairly original. The vampires look great. Uh, I don't want to say they're completely unoriginal because they're not, but they do a fine job. So, I would say it's not 100% originality, but it's a vampire story, so there are some original things throughout. Um, and it's basically they are there to kill. So it's pretty much survive or be killed is the plot of the movie, to be honest. Poster, let's see if, there's a couple different posters. There's one, it's like, it's got the characters, it's got Eben and Stella and surrounding characters on the front. There's also a couple, it's got like one of the vampires looking up into the sky, 30 Days of Night in red. So, there's a couple of different ones out there. You know, I think the poster was good. It stands out, and if you like the vampire movie genre anyway, it will draw you in. The colors are pretty vivid, but in a couple of them, they're using the blues and the white mixed with the red, and black. So there's a little bit of diversity within these color schemes of the poster, and I think it you could do better. I'm sure you could do worse, but I think these are a solid B. If I had to rate them, A through F, I would give these posters a B. And would I recommend 30 Days of Night? I gotta say, if you want I would say 30 Days of Night is a movie that you go into knowing you like this type of film. I don't think I'm going to be able to, bring to my side someone that doesn't like gory movies just because, I hate Josh Hartnett's in this. Melissa George, Ben Foster. This is not a film, some actors or actresses, you could watch, almost everything they do, whether good or bad. This is one, if you like Josh Hartnett in 40 Days, 40 Nights, you might not like him in 30 Days of Night unless you like this type of film. This is a genre film, and it has those kind of elements to it, and this is a gory and violent film. Vampire gore and vampire blood and violence, but if you know that going in, you're probably going to enjoy it because it is a ride to be enjoyed, to make you squirm a little. There's a couple of jump scares. I never really get the feeling in any vampire movie that I've really watched scared or like it's a horror movie. It's always like this is kind of like a survival movie to me. They're trying to survive, and there's some suspense, some thrills, some action. So if you like that type of film, you're going to enjoy this. If not, you're not going to enjoy it. I mean, that's just the way it is. That's just the way it is. So yeah, I would say, give it a chance. If you have, I think it's on Netflix. So if you have Netflix, if you've got an hour and 45, an hour and 50 minutes, at least watch the first 20 minutes of the film. It'll pull you in. I promise you, it'll pull you in. And if you like the first 20 minutes, you might continue to like the rest of the film. This is not a movie, though, like, Smile or Nope or, Megan. This is in line. This is not even a Thanksgiving or, this might be, it's a gory movie. Maybe Hostile Territory, not even the same type of film, but as far as blood and gore. Cabin Fever, blood and gore. So if you like those kind of movies or vampire violent movies, 28 Days Later, 28 Weeks Later, and I heard they're making a 28 Months Later. We'll see. I don't know. I would check it out if you like those kind of films. 30 Days of Night. It's on Netflix. Thank you for tuning in to Real Talk. Go to all of our social media pages. That's the Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, TikTok, and Instagram. Next week, we're going to dive into a straight out comedy called Napoleon Dynamite. So next week, we will be diving into Napoleon Dynamite, and it's going to be fun. Thank you for joining me tonight, and stay tuned for another episode of The Other People Show in just a moment.